Pictures taken in Frankfurt and Heidelberg will later turn up among Olson's slides. These cities were home to the U.S. Army's most important facilities in Germany. There is also a picture of the top-secret CIA headquarters in Germany, located in the building of IG Farben, in the heart of Frankfurt. What is Olson's new assignment? He is now working in an area that has nothing to do with biological weapons. Here, in the German offices of the CIA, the biochemist is conducting important conversations with U.S. intelligence officers. Increasingly, he can be found in the company of other CIA agents, including a certain John McNulty. It has to do with a top-secret project to use chemicals, drugs, and torture on human beings in order to break their will and make them submissive. Brainwashing. The code name for this operation? Artichoke. The team would enjoy the opportunity of applying artichoke techniques to individuals of dubious loyalty, suspected agents or plants, and subjects having known reasons for deception. In Oberursel in the Taunus Hills north of Frankfurt, hidden in old half-timbered houses, the U.S. Army led a quiet little interrogation center, Camp King. It was primarily Soviet agents and defectors from East Germany who were kept here, people the CIA considered to be communist spies. Special teams, the so-called rough boys, interrogated the prisoners. Former SS member Franz Gaidosch was hired just after the war by the Americans to tend the bar in the officers' mess at Camp King. Sometime in the year of 1952, in the top-secret interrogation center, Gaidosch runs across another German, Professor Kurt Blume.
For a long time, Blume was a doctor at Camp King. He also ran the clinic. He was a protege of the Americans and had been a concentration camp doctor. He conducted experiments.
The American officers who lived the good life at Camp King aren't disturbed about Blume's past. Was the former concentration camp doctor expected to lend his experience for their own planned experiments on human beings? A CIA consultant began planning the artichoke experiments as early as September of 1951.
The conversations at Oberursel pointed up signs and symptoms of drugs that might be used. We should look into the use of amnesia-producing drugs. Of course, their methods were not humane. They exerted a lot of pressure. There are ways of breaking people. At Camp King, they were notorious, the rough boys. Anything somebody didn't want to reveal, they would try to get it out of them.
There are many indications that the cruel experiments involving human beings, Operation Artichoke, took place in this isolated CIA safe house near Camp King at the edge of a town called Kronberg. The former Schustervilla, now called Haus Waldhof, was built shortly after the turn of the century as the summer residence of a Jewish banking family from Frankfurt. The Nazis confiscated it in 1934, and the Americans took it over after the war.
The neighbors, the community, didn't know who it was, what this place was, because the military personnel going in and out of the house weren't in uniform. They wore civilian clothing. The vehicles had no license tags, so the community wasn't even aware it was an American facility.
At Haus Waldhof, in June 1952, the CIA begins conducting brainwashing experiments using various drugs, hypnosis, and probably torture. One of the top-secret protocols documents a Russian agent being pumped full of medication. The goal of the experiments is to manipulate the human mind in order to extract secrets from its subjects. and then to erase their memory so they can't remember what happened to them. Dr. Frank Olson arrived in Frankfurt on June 12, 1952, from Hendon Military Airport near London. He left the Rhine mine region 3 days later, on June 15th. On June 13th, experiments are conducted with patient number 2, a suspected Soviet double agent.
He was troubled after he came back from Germany one time. He came back and he told me, he said, "Norm, I'll tell you right now, you and I never talked about this, but hey, you know, we're both grown-ups and this was rough." He said, "Norm, you would be stunned by the techniques that they used. They made people talk. They brainwashed people. They used all kinds of drugs, all kinds of torture."
The CIA's unscrupulous experiments on human beings continued the Nazi drug experiments they learned of during the liberation of the Dachau concentration camp.
They were using Nazis. They were using prisoners. They were using Russians. And they didn't care whether or not they came out of it or not.
One of the things we had to do was to assemble an...
Meanwhile, the U.S. Army was conducting extensive experiments with a new miracle drug, LSD. Here, for example, a soldier was expected to assemble a rifle while under the influence of the hallucinogen. The Army's LSD experiments took place on the campus of the Chemical Corps in Edgewood Arsenal. The scientists who worked in these laboratories in the early 50s and who collaborated closely with Frank Olson were looking for new hallucinogenic substances. They hoped to find a way to use the drugs on the battleground. A chemist from former Nazi Germany, Dr. Fritz Hoffmann, had been hired a few years earlier to spur the search for new behavior-modifying substances. Immediately after the war, he courted the Americans, seeking to ensure a job in the United States.
There was an interest in the U.S. during that time in looking at mood-altering drugs, from LSD to conucleomethyldimensolate and other possible mood-altering drugs. Fritz was interested in that area as well.
Several weeks later, on a windy...
After its experiments on soldiers, the Army saw potential in using LSD and other drugs to sedate and dope enemy troops. In short order, it would be possible to conquer territory without a fight.
His physical actions were noticeably slower.
A short time later, the CIA begins conducting its own LSD experiments in the bohemian New York neighborhood of Greenwich Village on Bedford Street. But unlike the Army experiments, the subjects of these tests, which took place in an apartment disguised as a brothel, would not be informed. The CIA hired prostitutes to pour LSD into their customers' drinks and then lure them into revealing secrets.
My purpose was to see that we got guys up there who we wanted to talk, and through other people we got prostitutes to come in and speak to these guys. And these prostitutes would put something, which I found out later on was LSD, into the drink and make them talk. Either they wanted to talk about narcotics, security, or crime. This was all part of the CIA experiment. They called it dirty tricks.
LSD, it was soon learned, was a much more effective way to loosen the tongue than alcohol was. Deep Creek Lake in western Maryland, a 3-hour drive from Washington. In an isolated vacation house at the edge of the lake, the CIA's Dirty Tricks Department converged here for a meeting with 10 of its scientists in November 1953. The meeting is about artichoke. According to the invitation, it was a conference for sports journalists. But in reality, the participants, one of them Frank Olson, were to be placed under the influence of LSD. One of the drinks has been spiked. Later, it will be said the CIA was conducting a kind of self-test, but without the knowledge of the participants.
I don't think, again, from what I heard, that he was drugged because he was a security agent. He was drugged because he talked too much.
When Frank Olson was later briefed about the LSD experiment, he knew immediately what it meant. They had interrogated him with artichoke techniques.
Friday evening, he came home and spent the weekend, in this house with my mother and brother and sister and me. And during much of that weekend, they sat on a sofa, which was just over here, and it was a foggy November weekend, as she described it. And they sort of sat there, holding hands and kind of staring out these big windows into the fog. And he described having made something he referred to as a terrible mistake.
The CIA brings Olson, accompanied by an agent, to New York. In the hotel, they are joined by a doctor working for the Secret Service, who administers medication. Frank Olson has become a security risk, but it seems the CIA has already found a solution.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.